I destroyed a family!
And he scooped out a handful of boogers and he sprinkled them into my nose. What the f are you looking at? Order something, you stupid cunt!
What the hell is it with Nick Cage and his weird, uncanny ability to take a mediocre to bad film and make it super entertaining? Because that's exactly what he did with the movie we're going to be talking about today, Sympathy for the Devil. I did watch a trailer based on this movie and it looked pretty fun, so I gave it a watch. And holy shit, Nicolas Cage goes 110% in this one. It's amazing. He goes crazy and I love it. But aside from that, there's not much else I like about this movie, to be honest. Most of the characters are dumb as hell. There's one twist in the movie and it's very predictable.
Yeah, sure, probably. But then again, maybe not.
Most of the movie is just Nicolas Cage acting like a psycho, talking to this guy in a car. So if that sounds like something you'd like, then maybe you'd love this movie. Who knows? There is some cool use of lighting in this movie. Nicolas Cage's acting is pretty great, to be honest. Joel Kinnaman did a great job too. And the script is pretty funny at times, I have to admit.
And it will be disgusting.
The movie was directed by a guy named Yuval Adler. The writer for this movie is Luke Paradise, and this is his first project on IMDb. So not a great sign, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if most of the funny scenes were improvised by Nicolas Cage. Some of you might recognize Joel Kinnaman from movies like The Suicide Squad or Suicide Squad.
I'm just gonna hurt you. Really, really bad.
He was also in a sci-fi show I quite liked named Altered Carbon. The first season was pretty good. I didn't get around to watching the second season though, but anyway. This movie takes place in Las Vegas, which also happens to be the city I live in. So it was kind of strange watching them drive down all these streets that I'm familiar with. It starts with the protagonist David dropping his son off and then driving to the hospital to meet his wife who is about to give birth. As he's driving along, we see Nick Cage glaring at him. This is when our boy jumps into action. He just pops into David's backseat out of nowhere. He's like, hey, what's up, dude? He's wearing a red blazer. He looks very fancy. He forces David to pick a random card at gunpoint.
Come on, a card, you know.
He pulls out the card David chooses from his jacket and then tells David to drive. David pleads with Nick to let him go, but Nick is a bit of a psychopath. He's seen drinking from a flask. He's a little off his rocker.
I'm your family emergency now.
I would like to take a second to thank today's sponsor. Who could it be that's sponsoring this video, I wonder? Is it a VPN? Brand new headphones? No, it's Raid Shadow Legends, of course. Who else would it be? You've probably heard of Raid Shadow Legends, but have you played it? Do you know what you're missing out on here? I'm talking hundreds of champions to collect, a super in-depth RPG battle system, amazing graphics, intense PvE boss fights. Sounds pretty cool, huh? Raid is introducing one of the toughest bosses yet. Hydra is a clan boss with 6 heads. Each head is a complete boss battle on its own, and each head makes your team suffer in different ways. There's the head of Suffering, the head of Blight, and the head of Torment. The head of Suffering gets more difficult the more damage you do to it. The head of Blight poisons you, and the head of Torment turns your champions into a bunch of crybabies. I'm not joking. It uses an ability called True Fear, which can make you skip your turns and lose access to your skills. And the only way to stop this is to hide from it. Wait a minute, you thought those were the only 3 heads? You're wrong. There's also the head of Mischief, the head of Decay, and the head of Wrath. I will let you guys find out what those are about on your own. If you're new to Raid, today's your lucky day. Because for all new players, you can get your hands on Stag Knight, one of the best epic champions around, as well as a skin for Stag Knight designed by JonTron. Just use the promo code JTSkin before October 7th. Do you want a free legendary champion? Well, look no further. Check out the brand new Sun Wukong. This is Raid's take on the mischievous Monkey King. All you've got to do to get him is to log into Raid on 7 different days between August 22nd and October 23rd. There has never been a better time to play Raid Shadow Legends. Use my link in the description or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses, such as the Epic Champion Drake, energy refills, skill tomes, and XP boosters. Thank you so much to Raid for sponsoring this video. I really appreciate it. Now back to the review.
So then David starts driving away with this crazy guy in his back seat. This is like my worst nightmare. A crazy guy with a gun jumping in the back of my car and forcing me to drive somewhere. Holy shit. I'm surprised David didn't just make a run for it as soon as this guy entered his car. That's kind of scary, dude. I don't know. And your wife kind of needs you right now. She's about to give birth. So yeah, you have this crazy guy in your back seat. Get out of your car and run for it. You know what I mean? Take the keys with you so he can't drive your car. You're in a parking garage. Surely there has to be some people around. Nick then starts going through David's shit in his back seat.
Ooh, what's this, I wonder?
He then stares out the window like a dog seeing the world for the first time.
Sir,
I like the lights.
Nick orders David to turn onto a highway. Eventually they stop for gas. And in the light of the gas station, we can see that Nick has his hair dyed red. Very cool. Nick searches through David's glove compartment and finds photos of his family. He looks at pictures of David's wife and he goes, "Can you say sexy?"
Somebody say sexy.
Nick tells David that he reminds him of a drunk that he knew in Boston. He tells David that his mother is dying of lung cancer. David asks Nick if his mother was at the hospital that they were at.
That's right, get
Mother's at the hospital.
Don't.
And Nick says, "Don't interrupt me. That's rude. Don't do that. No, don't do that."
You interrupting me, don't.
David tells Nick that his mother was also religious and that his dad used to get drunk and beat her. David interrupts him again, so Nick does this.
Take me to the hospital, the Boulder City Hospital.
Don't you have a car?
God damn it. And we're only getting started, guys. This next part is so funny. Nick answers a phone call from David's wife. She's understandably groaning in pain, and then Nick mocks her. David gets upset and starts punching the ceiling, and then Nick says this in response.
For the devil may start to envy those who suffer too deeply and throw them out into heaven.
What the hell are you talking about?
David notices a cop parked on the side of the road, so he speeds up so he'll get pulled over. Nick somehow doesn't notice him doing this, and he doesn't notice the cop until the cop starts following them with their lights on. Unlikely, but whatever. Nick was drinking, so... While they're driving away from the cop, Nick turns and faces the cop and he's like, "Calm down, dude."
Would you calm down?
They finally pull over and the cop approaches the car. What do you do if you're holding a hostage and a cop approaches the car that you're in? You just act like a massive douche to the cop and hope he walks away. At least that's what Nick does.
Please, Mr. Big Policeman, anything but trouble.
No,
Obviously this doesn't work and would never work.
Are you fucking crazy? All I did was ask a simple question and now this big cock!
So Nick ends up shooting the cop. He gets out of the car, puts a couple rounds into the cop's face. He brought the key to David's car with him, so David couldn't drive off. Nick stands above this guy's body for way too long. They're in Las Vegas. There's cars everywhere. I don't care where you are. A car would definitely pass within the time period that he shot the cop and continued to shoot the cop. You can be driving around at 3 in the morning and there's cars everywhere still. So Nick gets back into David's car and David tells Nick that he probably destroyed a family by killing this guy. And this is how Nick reacts.
I destroyed a family! I did! Drive!
Later, in an attempt to escape, David jumps out of the moving vehicle with Nick in the back seat. For some reason, David left his phone in the car when he did this. Probably would have been a good idea to put it in your pocket first. Nick reaches into the front seat and manages to stop the car. In order to lure David out of hiding, Nick uses his phone to pick up a call from David's wife. He pretends to be someone who works at the hospital's gift shop. Obviously, it would be really weird for this guy to ask her for her room number, right? Well, this is how Nick asks her for her room number.
But I am glad you called because he wanted me to ask you what room number you're in.
He like screams the question at her. I'm surprised she answered him.
Okay, uh-huh.
Yeah, she does for some reason. If my wife hadn't heard from me for a while, and she's in a hospital about to give birth, and then a random person talks to her from my phone number, and he talked to her like this?
So when my wife was pregnant and delivering, there was so much pressure on her bladder, golden shower explosion cascading all over the doctor's...
Yeah, that would be kind of a massive red flag, I think. But for some reason, David's wife just doesn't care. He's just a weirdo, I guess. And Nick's excuse for why David wasn't on the phone is really stupid.
No, he had to take a call from the warehouse, so he's using my landline. Better reception.
I don't know why she didn't question this at all. Nick breaks his nose trying to stop the car. And this is a huge problem for him because now he's 50% sex. At least that's what he says.
I wanted to be 100% sex tonight, and you cut that in half. I'm now 50% sex. Look, see that?
David decides that it isn't worth the risk to allow this crazy guy who just found out where his wife is to go back to the hospital to potentially hurt his wife. So he shows himself, and eventually they continue driving together. Nick tells David that he's never been happy because of his sinuses growing up. He tells him about Mucus Man, a bald dude with a briefcase full of boogers, who would show up at night and sprinkle boogers into Nick's nose.
And the Mucus Man was a skinny guy in a suit and tie with a bald head and a briefcase full of boogers. And he scooped out a handful of boogers and he sprinkled them into my nose.
This part is so random. They stop at a diner, and to nobody's surprise, Nick continues to act like a psycho here as well. He forces David to order some food. Cheddar or mozzarella, David? What's it gonna be, bro? Better be cheddar.
Cheddar.
Nick's acting in this scene is pretty great. Actually, his acting throughout the entire movie is pretty amazing.
Great fucking night!
During this part, you can tell that Nick is envious of David's happiness. Or at least David's happiness enrages Nick. This part will make more sense as I continue. David asks Nick who he thinks he is. And Nick's face in response to this is amazing. Just watch him. Nick starts explaining to David what he likes about the term witching hour, and David interrupts him again. Bad move, because Nick doesn't like being interrupted. I love this part so much.
God damn it! I told you that in the car!
There's a motorboat stuck in your mouth, just shut up.
There's a motorboat stuck in your mouth!
I bet you anything that line was improvised. During this part, he screams at a random trucker, assaults David, handcuffs him to the table, and walks into the diner's kitchen. He takes the cook and waitress's cell phones. We also learn that Nick hates mozzarella on tuna melts.
Nobody puts mozzarella on a tuna melt.
I found out on IMDb that the cook is actually the owner of the diner, and his name is Burns Burns. Kind of a weird name, right? Burns Burns.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
But they never once say his name in the movie. So yeah, I guess all the people watching this review, now you know. This guy's name, it's Burns Burns. Nick changes the song on the diner's music box, and he starts singing along to it. He then starts dancing in front of the random trucker guy. Just look at his moves in this scene, it's so funny. Nick plays such a great psychopath in movies. I swear to God. Just watch him dance in this scene. What is happening? He sits back down next to David and starts singing at him. My God. This movie is so entertaining at times. The music is loud as fuck too. But then magically the volume lowers.
I have decided that we should play a little game.
I mean, obviously they have to do this so you can hear what the characters are saying to each other, right? But it's still kind of weird. And then out of nowhere, a mother and her daughter walk into the diner. Nick finds this quite interesting.
Oh shit, oh shit.
It's getting good.
Earlier, Nick told the owner that he has to have these tuna melts done in 4 minutes, not a second longer.
Okay, I want them done in 5 minutes. Actually, no, 4 minutes. You can hear me right then.
Yeah, I
Well,
did.
then would you do me a favor? Would you please stop saying what when it's absolutely crystal fucking clear what I just said?
If you have a psycho in your diner, you should probably leave the diner. What's hilarious is that the owner uses the back door to escape much later, and this results in the owner's death. So dumb. Nick's facial expressions throughout this movie are so good. They honestly bumped this movie from a 5 to a 6 out of 10 for me. It's just so funny. Like, Nick puts 1000% of himself into these bland-ass movies. Nick Cage acts in these subpar movies with such fervor that it's really difficult not to admire him. David tells Nick that he's probably confusing him with someone else. And then Nick responds by saying this. I love when he goes, "What?"
David, would you please stop saying what?
And then Nick winks at David in this really strange fashion. Nick and David's conversation ramps up like crazy. Nick starts screaming like a madman. He keeps repeating tick, 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 tick. He has this white lucky rabbit foot, which will make more sense later in the movie.
Okay, you know what? Time's up.
Just as the tuna melts are about to be served, David headbutts Nick. He then shoots the trucker, like he really wants to kill this trucker. He goes all out trying to kill this guy. Spoiler alert, David isn't actually named David. He's the guy directly responsible for the death of Nick's family. So Nick is just trying to force him to reveal that information, and he's doing this by killing innocents. The longer David goes without admitting this, the more people Nick will kill. The mother and daughter are still in this diner for some reason, even though there's a psychopath screaming with a gun. done? Why wouldn't they immediately leave upon seeing this? Why are they seated? It makes no sense. Anyway, Nicolas Cage walks over to them and he points his gun at them. And then finally David is like, "You're right, okay, you're right. I am who you think I am."
I'm exactly who you think I am.
So Nick walks over and starts beating David while screaming, it's you, over and over. Apparently, David's real name is James. Honestly, this is when the movie should have ended. Nick should have shot James right here and then killed himself, because that's all Nick wanted to hear. He wanted James to admit that he was the guy who killed his family. But obviously that wouldn't make a lot of sense for the viewer, because they would still want to, you know, learn more about these characters and what happened. So we gotta stretch things out unrealistically. Finally, the woman and her daughter exit the diner. This is when the diner owner, Burns, tries to escape through the back exit. Nick saunters after him and puts a bullet in this guy's back. What the hell's wrong with you, Burns? Why weren't you out of there way earlier? And guess where the waitress is? She's hiding in the girl's bathroom, dude. Come on. You know there's a back exit. Just use that and leave. It's the girl's bathroom. Nick can't go in there. It's the rules. So yeah, Nick walks in there. He asks her a question about cheese or something, and she answers honestly. So he's like, all right, you're cool enough. You can live. David gets his hands on his cell phone and calls 911. Nick turns on all the burners in the kitchen and throws a bottle of alcohol on them. David, or James, is finally able to free himself. Nick shoots him in the leg as he tries to escape. James hobbles his way out into the parking lot and he wraps his belt around his leg to stop the bleeding. Nick walks out after him with a handful of Molotovs. Yeah, I guess he spent the time to make a bunch of Molotovs. James could have easily escaped while he was doing this. I don't know. I guess he saw that he shot him in the leg, so whatever, I have time. Let's put together a bunch of Molotovs. Nick reveals that he's been watching James for quite a while.
You, wife, little boy.
So yeah, Nick is obviously kind of a dumbass when it comes to doing this kind of thing. He's just lucky that everybody else in the movie is far dumber. Nick stalks James through the truck lot. Burns is seen here dying. Nick pops one in his head for good measure for some reason. Poor Burns.
Why is Burns even here? He left out the back entrance while James and Nick exited out of the front entrance. So Burns crawled his dying ass all the way to the front parking lot? Maybe that's where he was parked?
What you say?
James and Nick get into a bit of a scuffle. Nick tells James to stop acting like a funny little bitch.
But I swear to God, James, if you don't stop acting like this phony little bitch.
Nick promises to not harm James's wife if they go back to the car and drive off. At this point, we start to learn more about Nick's past. Nick explains how his wife had witnessed an execution by one of his associates. His wife had gone around telling people about this execution. She was extremely depressed. Basically, she became a huge liability for this crime syndicate. So Nick was called by his boss to take care of it. Obviously, he's not going to have an easy time killing his own wife. Like, what the fuck? Why would you even ask him to do this? That makes no sense. I guess it was a way to like test his loyalty or something. This criminal organization was in Boston, so I guess James fled to Las Vegas. Nick's plan was to leave Boston with his family. He was going to attempt to cut ties with this criminal organization. One night, he left to get travel supplies, and when he returned home, he explains that he found his house on fire with his family inside.
It's glowing all Halloween orange, like a jack-o'-lantern.
His daughter had a bunch of white pet bunnies. Nick describes the horror of all these bunny screams in the house as it burnt. Nick's acting while he tells this story is really great, actually. He comes across super convincing. Nick had become a manic drunk.
Ask me why.
His only goal to get revenge on the person who killed his family, and he blames James for his family's demise. How he knows that James was responsible, that's unknown. Nick had told David earlier in the movie that his mom has lung cancer, but it turns out that was a lie, and Nick was the one with lung cancer all along, which might explain why he was at the hospital, but it's obviously more likely that he just followed James there.
I've been watching for a while now, James.
So since James called the police are on their tail. James admits that their boss Sullivan had ordered the hit on Nick's wife.
You ordered the hit.
Before he drives off the road, crashing the car, Nick climbs out, barely still breathing. Two cops walk down the ridge to the crash site before they're both shot dead. James shows himself with Nick's gun in hand. James explains to Nick what happened that fateful night when he murdered Nick's family. He tells Nick that he never planned to kill his daughter.
I never meant to kill your little girl.
He then chokes Nick to death. So yeah, that was not very satisfying. I would have liked it a lot more if they both died. So now, as a viewer with full context, you're rooting for James's downfall, not Nick's.
But we don't get it.
James listens to a voicemail from his weird wife.
We had a little girl, David. I'm holding her. She's so beautiful.
Who sounds strangely hopeful given her husband's sudden vanishing on the night of his child's birth. Why would she think that's normal at all? She was on the phone with him earlier in the movie, and he told her that he was almost there.
Almost there, babe, okay? I'm almost there.
And then suddenly he vanishes. And then suddenly she's talking to this psychopath who has her husband's phone. And he's talking to her like this.
It was sexual, man!
But yeah, that's normal. Hours go by and still no sign of her husband. Wow, why isn't she calling the police? Why isn't she freaking out? Instead, she leaves him this nice voicemail like, oh my God, it's a baby girl. Like, our life is gonna be so amazing. Where the hell are you? Doesn't matter. Why didn't David's wife ask anybody to go check in with the gift shop owner? Because as far as she knows, he was the last guy with David's phone.
I work at the gift shop at the hospital, yeah.
So obviously he would know where David is, and it's been a long time and he should have showed up by now. This would have definitely resulted in her finding out that all that was a lie. But for some reason this doesn't happen. I know she's kind of preoccupied with a birth, but still, whatever, dude. So yeah, James puts the gun in Nick's hand. More cops show up. James says to himself over and over, your name is David Chamberlain. You're David Chamberlain.
I'm David Chamberlain. David Chamberlain.
Because he had left this other life far behind. And he kind of used this new identity to bury his other life. And with it, the trauma that it carried.
Drinking myself to death.
So yeah, this movie would have been a lot more satisfying if James got his comeuppance. As Nick was lying there dying, I was kind of hoping he would, I don't know, pull a gun out of his ass and shoot James. But that doesn't happen, sadly. So yeah, this movie is a bit trite, predictable, and derivative, but that doesn't mean it's not entertaining as hell. Overall, it's a pretty fun movie. Definitely not the best movie I've ever seen, but Nicolas Cage makes it worth the watch. So yeah, that's what I thought of Sympathy for the Devil. It was a lot more fun than I thought it would be, so that's cool. Let me know what you'd like me to review next in the comment section down below. Don't forget to check out
AlienClothing.com.
AYYLIEN clothing.com. My personal clothing brand. I just released 3 new game-related shirts in a collaborative effort with the YouTuber Indie Mouse. The shirts are based on the games you might love: Elden Ring, Silent Hill 2, and Resident Evil 4. I love all of them. And if you're not much of a gamer, I'm pretty sure there's something over at AlienClothing.com you'll like. Thank you so much to all my patrons that make videos like this possible. All the names scrolling up right now, thank you guys so much. I love you. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's always appreciated, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!